enough. Just to give myself a little bit of an introduction. Oh, that's me. Hi. So my name is Brie. I am a law student. I'm an actor, model, again host, and all-around frazzled bisexual. And I'm going to be your guys' host tonight. What else do we have? We have Jackson, who was one of our speakers tonight. Unfortunately, they're not able to make it, but they are an incredible award-winning poet who just opened their own bookstore in Newtown with their partner, which is so cute. And I've been told that it's very important that I inform the room that they have a beautiful greyhound called Dora there as well. So, extremely important information.
They have a lucky duck now too.
They have a lucky duck, so amazing. So, Jackson's book is called I Am a Human Being, and I've read it personally. It's incredible. Jackson is a very important and powerful voice in queer literature at the moment, and I highly recommend that you check out their book and their bookshop if you have the chance. Unfortunately, they can't make it tonight. However, they'll be there with us in spirit, I'm sure. What else do I have here? Just some quick little admin things. We're going to make Ashley Bloomfield proud, so if anyone could just do the little QR scans around the place, that would be amazing. Going to be some good team of 5 millions. Toilets are just up and around the corner to the right over there. And evacuation exits are just on either side, just to the left and the right. Emergency meeting point is on Fitson Street. So, just a little bit of an introduction. What I love about horrible. just yell. You know what? I can do that. I can do it. So just yell. I love to yell. I can do that. Thank you. I didn't work after all that. You know what? We tried. We don't need it. Anyway, so what I really love about queer experience and expression is that it does encompass such a wide variety of experiences. Obviously, I express my queerness by dressing like a cupcake, and we all have little ways in which we are so different and diverse, and that's really shown really well today in our lineup for you. Tonight we are going to hear from the artist behind Trans webcomic Brutal Tales, Sam Orchard. We have noise and metal musician Olga Lapin. And we also are going to hear from Green MP and Takatāpui trailblazer, Dr Elizabeth Kerekere. In the audience tonight, we also have Tara Black, who is a graphic artist, comic book artist, graphic novelist. I don't know what the term is. But she will be doing some live drawings of the speakers, which is amazing to have. We also have Paul and Neil up the back, live streaming this to Facebook. Oh, hi. And getting a wee copy for our collections and for oral history purposes. Also, extremely important, please feel free to help yourself to the little cookies out here. Otherwise, I will be out here eating them all at the end. They're amazing. I know that a lot of people have been a little bit shy to get up and get a cuppa or a tea. They're there for that exact reason. Don't be shy. I was going up eating all the cookies last time and no one else was there with me. Don't be afraid to get amongst the cookies. I cannot stress that enough. Anyways, so I'd love to pass you on to, here we go, Tara Black, who's doing the drawing. To our first speaker, who is Sam Orchard, ready to come and tell you about his art.
I'll get myself a 10-minute thing. So 15 minutes. I'll give myself 15. So yeah, my name is Sam, and what I thought I would do today is just talk about drawing comics, how I got into that, what they mean to me and the things that I'm trying to do with comics and other art projects. And if I have time, I'll talk about one of my favourite art projects that I've done. So, yes, my name is Sam. So when I was growing up, I was trying to, I guess I had that experience where I didn't see myself in film and television, in media, and that makes it really hard to conceptualise the idea of the self if you have no words for that. And I love stories. My great-grandma was an amazing storyteller, and I remember kind of sitting at her house and she'd tell me stories and she'd have this beautiful cheeky smile on her face, and it would be kind of weird stories that aren't very eventful about the lagoon behind her house or stories about my mum, but the way that she told them was just so full of joy and heart and kind of sneakiness that it felt like we were creating our own little world together, and that feels really important to me and has had an effect on my life in terms of just the power of storytelling. So I watched a lot of television and film when I was growing up, and a lot of the stories about queer women, because I grew up and was raised as a girl, were all about people who died, or who killed people, or killed people and then died, and it was super sad. And I ended up doing a lot of study around the tropes of queer women in cinema and television, and that was also around the time that this came out, which, when I first started watching it, didn't have anyone who died or was a killer, which, spoilers, that didn't end like that. But, I was trying to work out what the difference between some of these older films were and this new wave of representations of queer women, and again trying to find myself in some of the ways in which I felt seen by these shows, and the L word was not it for me. A lot of the depictions of queer masculinities in women and transness are horrifying, and I went and watched it again just last year with the new reboot coming out, and it was even worse than I remembered it. It's terribly, terribly bad. But what I think was the difference between these representations, what I think the shift was around here was that these women were seen as acceptable because they were mostly white or white passing. They were really, really, really rich. And even the masculine ones were really hegemonically coded as stereotypically feminine, and so that's what kind of gave them a pass. So I think that a lot of media, and this is slowly changing, but what I came to was that anything that was different was seen as somehow unstable and bad or wrong, and therefore would result in something terribly unfortunate happening to that person, i.e. death. So that made me really sad, and I made a lot of emo art about how media was super sad and upsetting, which kind of didn't solve my problem of finding myself and finding words for myself. But what art did was find a way through that for me, and that was around expressing some of the pain of that, but also around creating space for the stories that I wanted to tell. So I'm kind of old, and around this time there was this thing called Web 2.0. We're now in Web 3.0, but Web 2.0 was when the internet went through a drastic shift where a lot of websites like MySpace and Blogger and Bebo, if you remember those, relied on user-generated content in order to populate their sites. So suddenly the internet, instead of, the first internet, you basically had to have coding and knowledge about internet and how that works. Then Web 2.0 happened and said, hey, actually, you don't need any of that. We just want your content. And created a system where it invited and needed people to create their own content in order for the sites to thrive. And that's when I was like, oh, the internet, I can put my stories on the internet. And that's how I started getting into comics, was that I had an art form that I was kind of growing in myself. I had a lot of feelings that I needed to express, and Web 2.0 provided me with a place for them to sit. So I started drawing a lot, and a lot of the time I don't know what I'm feeling or what I'm going to draw, but the act of drawing helps me to figure things out and to be able to work through and order my thoughts. So that's what I started doing, and I started making a comic called Rooster Tales, which started 11 years ago now, no, 12 years ago, in which I just kind of was putting up my stories on the internet of, hello, this is me, this is my first ever comic. My style has changed a little bit, but each week I put up a story about things that I'm thinking about, and share them with the world and whoever wants to read them. And I've been doing that for 10 years, so this is my latest comic. And I kind of started doing it just for me because I wanted to work out who I was and how I was. And at the time when I first started doing comics, there wasn't a lot of trans-masculine stories on the internet, which now there is, there's heaps. But they've really helped me to find my voice and find ways to imagine myself into reality, to create community, and to celebrate things. So there's an amazing kind of proliferation of queer comic artists in New Zealand now, and creating incredible, diverse comics about different things and different ways into queerness. And I'm so excited to have that community and those stories out there, and the kind of diversity of ways in which people share and tell stories. Even comics as a medium, I think, is a really queer medium because it kind of messes people's expectations. People think it's a little bit subversive, people don't really take it seriously, but it's really powerful and impactful, and it also is something that kind of defies definitions in some ways, in the same ways that queerness does, that it pushes against, like, it's not really just a picture and it's not really just words, and it's more than the sum of its parts, but it's something different entirely. And I think that that's really amazing, and so that's my way to art. And also because hiring a film crew and making people do acting is more expensive. One of the things that happened within, halfway through me drawing comics was marriage equality stuff, and that really had a big impact on my life. Not because I wanted to be married or get married, but because I was really interested in the way in which activism talked about difference in community and change. And a lot of the rhetoric around getting marriage equality stuff across the line was around pushing our differences aside and saying, we're just like you, just let us get married, we'll be just like you, and it's all the same. And I had a really strong and upset reaction against that, because I think it's so much more powerful to come from a place of, we're different, we are powerful, and it's our differences that need to be celebrated and that will and recognised, and we deserve rights through our difference rather than our sameness. And I think that that's something that we, as a rainbow community, we struggle with a lot. There's lots of tensions around that, and we see that coming out in terms of pride parades and legal reform and things like that, that we don't, parts of ourselves really do want to fit in. And I speak to myself like, I want to fit in, and I also want to stand out, and I have these two parts wrestling inside of myself in that. And I think as a rainbow community, we struggle with that as well, together and separately. And so that's something that I think about a lot when I'm doing art projects and art. Got 4 minutes. But yeah, this is something that I it has become my kind of anchor point back to myself of, is this something that is celebrating difference, or is this me trying to fit in? Am I trying to expand things out and make more spaciousness in the world for people to be and be celebrated in their differences, or am I trying to narrow things and combine things? And I always want to talk about our differences and complexities as being good and powerful and important to shine through. And that kind of informs some of the work that I do as an artist, designer, illustrator person who sometimes gets paid but mostly doesn't. I've done kids' books and stickers and resources and things like that. But one of my favourite projects that I've ever been involved in is We Are Beneficiaries, which is somewhat separate from rainbow activism, but is also embedded with rainbow activism. Most of the people involved in the volunteering, whether they were artists or people behind the scenes, were queer and trans and gender diverse. I think as a community, rainbow people are such staunch and amazing volunteers, and the generosity of spirit and time and energy that we give to projects are really powerful. So We Are Beneficiaries came about 2 elections ago, in which Matiria Ture stood down after she talked about the welfare system being broken and it forces you to lie. And that was the first time in that election campaign that I really felt like, she's speaking to something that I understand and I know. Artists quite often don't get paid, and we have a lot of experiences on benefits in and out, and a lot of us see the value outside of paid work as being really important to social fabric. So I got really mad, and so I did what I do when I feel mad, is that I drew, and I asked some friends to draw about their experience on the benefit. And I thought, like 2 or 3 or 4 of us would share our stories, and then we'd feel kind of good, and then we'd share them on Facebook, and people would be like, "You're so brave," and we'd be like, "Yeah, we know, it's awesome." And then people started contacting us and saying, "Can you share our stories too?" And artists started volunteering, because artists are also good volunteers. And then more stories came, and then heaps more stories came, and then within a kind of 2 or 3 month period, we managed to collect 200 stories and of people who were sharing their experiences as beneficiaries and how they wanted the system to change, what their wishes for the system to change would be. And we presented them to Parliament in a very beautiful and heart-wrenching report in order to enact social change. And that work is still needing to be done, and those stories, I feel like, still haven't been heard and respected in the way that they should. But something that was really powerful in what we could do was, as artists, was to sit and honour and share those stories and say, you are important, and you're important enough to make art about, which I feel like, because of shame and stigma around poverty and class and beneficiaries don't often get those chances to feel valued and valuable. And so that was our project, was to try and honour that. We also really wanted to have welfare reform, but that's still on its way. So that's me. That's the end of my talk. I have 3 seconds left.
That is time management if ever I saw it, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's really inspiring to see just how powerful our voices are when we come together as a community. It's incredible. So our next speaker goes by the name of Olga Lapin. I had to make sure I got her surname right. I was about to butcher it. Olga, she is in two bands, Marrowspawn and Coerced, and make sure you go and catch her performing at Valhalla at Cuba Duper this weekend. In both bands. And she also creates solo music as Body Ache, I believe that is the name. So her genre style is a bit of a mix between industrial, noise, metal. So we love those vibes. Get on it and get out and see her at Cuba Duper. In the meantime, come hear her lovely speech. Forwards, back.
Right. I'm also going to do the timer I did. Okay. So, I am not actually good at speaking in front of people at all. I'm not very used to it. But I am going to try my best. So, any awkward pauses, just ignore it. And also, I got a lot of inspiration from listening to Sam's book as well. It gave me a lot of ideas, which is really cool. So, basically, there is some links. That's my Instagram where I make art. That's the Body Ache Bandcamp where I do Body Ache art. Just some simple housekeeping. I don't have any music to actually show in this presentation. You're just going to have to take my word for it. Like, I make music, I promise. And I also do a lot of visual art that ranges from quite detail-intensive stippling to more collage-based, and I have one of my collages here as well. Most of these collages are made digitally as opposed to physically, but I enjoy making them. And the themes are about mostly just overcoming pain, like mentally. There is a lot of very clear mental anguish in there. I mean, yeah. But I did also want to talk about, just from listening to Sam's, is because this is probably the first point of my life where I've actually felt like I've been in a part of a community, as opposed to just being an outsider from, because I used to live in Christchurch, and before all that time, I used to just make this art, never release it, never do anything with it. I don't really. This is the first time I've ever felt a part of the greater whole. Usually I feel more of the outsider. So doing something like this for me is very new, very, wow, so brave. But we're going to try our best. So there's some more artwork. Here's some more I did, because I also do commissions for local bands, which is how I've found to connect myself to the community when I moved to Wellington. Like Glassblowers, a local grindcore band. I do this great t-shirt, the Waste Imperialist Borders shirt. That's a big favorite. This is for a black metal solo project by my friend Karen, Verania, and this one was actually a gift from my friend Fergus. With the teeth. I just said, give me a prompt, he said, teeth. I drew teeth. So these are my two bands. So that's Marrowspawn. We're like a grindcore band. So we're a grindcore band. So grindcore is essentially, imagine if death metal and punk had fused into one, but also you also chop it in half, so every song's about a minute long. But also like 4 times as fast. The fun thing about Marrowspawn is we don't have a drummer. We actually have all of our drum tracks because we just haven't found a drummer who can kind of play it, or just anyone who's willing to. So it's a pretty fun setup. I also like to do bass, and I also play harsh noise in the background. So I usually have a little table, and it's just full of things that probably look like bombs, but and their only purpose is to scream and make really horrible noises. Very fun. Coerced is a more stripped down band. It's more like post-hardcore. How do I describe it? It's just like punky rock and roll, kind of. You know, it's like the vibes are a bit more down. It's a band that I've been trying to make ever since I was in high school, just a post-hardcore band in a similar style to 90s bands like At the Drive-In or Unwound. And that band I'm incredibly proud of. and both these bands playing Cuba Duper on Saturday. Bit of a holler stage. Please come see us. We're lots of fun. So, yes, okay. So, the main thing I'm going to talk about this talk is body ache, because this is where I've sort of established my voice. Body ache started around the time, I think just before my first year of university. I didn't have a good time at university. I had a horrible time. I went to university because that's what you do. That's what you get called to do. And considering I had to spend an extra term in high school just to get the credits, it's probably wasn't my best call. So instead of going to lectures, I started this project because it's the only thing that got me to kind of overcome. And I really like the challenge because the way I created this album is I had nothing but an audio interface and my flatmate's guitar. And when you hear it, you probably won't actually expect it because I ended up learning how to program drums, how to mix, how to engineer the sounds with using literally nothing, just with free alternatives, free software, just trying my best to try and push out a sound that I tried to aspire to, which was more just industrial cross grindcore aesthetics, which are just practically just fast music, distorted drums. Yeah. And this project was, and so this was also the first project that I had ever officially released, instead of just, haha, here's some songs I put on my sound card, here is a collection. And the only reason that happened, because I've been making music since I was 13 and recording it. I've been learning to record music since I was just 13, just by finding obtuse way to record sounds. Whether it's involving using my phone to record myself playing guitar and putting it into software and mixing it with effects to, oh god, I used to do some real silly stuff. And the only reason it ever came out is because my good friend just pretty much made me. He was just like, it's coming out, you have to. I'm like, okay, fine. So this was the first EP, Behemoth Suffering, which came out around that time. This 2019 is definitely, the first sentence sums it up. You could I'm trying to not make my presentation overly depressing and just kind of let you guys fill in the lines about how bad that was. But yeah, so it came out and I can't remember the notes on the next slide. Well, that was so hard. So I was at university for the first time. I didn't know what I was doing with myself. I didn't really know my future. I didn't really have a voice to express. No one around me was like me. I didn't really have any friends who were kind of into the same aesthetics I was into. All of my friends around that time were maths and computer science students. But showing them the stuff, they were just and you're like, cool. Then the recording process, there was a lack of resources. I had no money, no gear. I did do 4 years of music school in high school, but it was more, I showed up sometimes. So I think I didn't actually learn anything from music school, and I started learning more about music being outside of music school. And I could talk about hours about how I want the way music to be taught to be changed, just because they should really, it's the force of theory, especially when you're neurodivergent. It's just kind of I barely know how to hold my guitar, let alone play all of the major scales. Not gonna happen. I would rather just be able to feel a guitar and then pick up the theory by seeking it out myself when the context arises. So the outcome of this EP release is when I started meeting more people in the online community as opposed to my local community, because Christchurch is quite small, it's quite a niche. You tend to find more communities about it online. This is where I started. I didn't really start actually meeting a lot of people in this community until 3 years later after this release, which is quite fun. And now I'm in a very lovely community of friends all over the world of just trans musicians who are into noise music or extreme music, and seeing all of us and everyone just immediately collaborates together. Everyone's in bands with each other online. It's great. and I really wanted to push home that community can be found anywhere. Like, it's not a physical thing. It's like, I mean, it is, but it's, you know what I'm saying. That you can find it. Community is always there. It's always a place. There's always a group of people who always like the same weird, silly things you do. They're out there. Go find them. They're looking for you. And yeah, the other things I learned from this is this is the first time people would talk to me about my own project, which I found very weird. I found that a kind of out-of-body experience, no pun intended. But like, it was strange having people come up to me and talk to me about my projects. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear someone talking about things you made, and it's and then learning my experience with DIY labels, and DIY labels are really cool because I learned about so people run DIY music labels for like really niche music, and the way they get these very small runs of tapes to each other is by tape trading for like just all over the world. That's how tapes get around. And to me, that is so cool. It's such currency does not matter. We just want, you give me some music, I give you some music. Now I'm down, music is now another part of the world. Like, I'm pretty sure there are tapes for Vehement Suffering in the States, probably Europe. I worked with that release, I worked with a New Zealand label, and I think with the later ones I did use some American labels, and I think, who knows what made it? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, I have no idea. This is the first time I've ever had to learn how to do physicals and merch. Owning your own music, this little form factor, it's really crazy. It's like my baby, my child. So, and then after that, I did a series of splits. Splits are basically like, it's pretty much, it's just, how do I explain a split? I should have written it down. Pretty much, two different groups come together and they contribute a song each, and then you release it, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's just like a little selection of stuff. So I did great stuff like Carmeta Glass is like a noise band from America. They were really cool. They were the first ones I did it with, and they are really great because they were the first ones to approach me about something like this. They were the first ones that were like, oh, we heard your name, we want to do a split together. And I'm like, me? Oh, cool. Then Hallucinogenic Bulb, it's my friend Dave. Dave is really cool. He makes harsh noise in Hallucinogenic Bulb. It's just straight up, just pure noise. He makes a lot of noise with, I think it's like Game Boys. He like hooks them up. He makes like harsh noise with them. Really cool. Altered Illusions with Goth Girl and Press Wound. This one was probably the first time I actually released like a pure harsh noise release. I wanted, because the other two acts were very much just big distortions and walls. That was fun. So, and then now I released a single called The Flesh Remix, which was a remix of a song of Vehement Suffering while I had tonsillitis, and I was really like, I had something to do. And it was 3 years after the EP, and learning how my voice has changed, because during that time I did go through okay, so a little backstory. I originally transitioned when I was 14 in high school, but I detransitioned for redacted reasons, information not available. And then I retransitioned last year. So being able to visit a project like Body Ache, where that mental anguish, the willpower, strength, and overcoming now with on top of a new type of expression and able to express myself in my truest self. There was some aesthetical differences. So the way I can describe the original song is just distorted guitars, like just classic industrial, everything sounds like a trash can. I have replaced the guitars on this track with an ambient synth, but still kept the screaming and still kept the drums, but I've lowered the drums a lot down, and it creates this much more different, almost holy vibe. As I also use this project as almost a catharsis for spiritual, like my beliefs spiritually, which they're not really that deep. I just find a lot of comfort in the culture of Russian Orthodox because it's how I was raised. I was born in Moscow, Russia. I moved here when I was 4. Yeah, still, so that's why I have the Kiwi accent. But I need the connection to my culture, or else I go insane. Like it's such a like my room looks like a Russian grandmother's room. It's kind of weird. I quite enjoy it. But like the expressional changes, the lowering distortions, just keeping a more balanced and full sound as opposed to just overwhelming the listener with abrasiveness has just shown how I've kind of channeled my own pain in a much more different way as opposed to pure aggression to just a more, I'm going to make another body pun if I keep doing this, a full body expression. Thank you. So, and then also, so I've noticed that when I'm doing this presentation, it's pretty much just me talking about myself, and it feels really weird to me. I actually am like, I feel really weird talking about myself. And so I actually have a whole lot of other projects. So I've pretty much dedicated my entire life at the moment to creating and just making things. So I have, and a way to overcome having so many projects, inspirations, ideas, and having, oh, I've actually gone over 15 minutes. Damn. So I have a lot of different side projects. I find a lot of subgenres really interesting that I get to the point that I have to make them. So I've made myself a fake record label where I only put my own music because I got tired of keeping track of 50 Bandcamp accounts. Don't try it, it's not fun. I don't even remember half of them. I don't know where a lot of music has gone. Having that expression change from when I was 13 is because I've been quite isolated growing up, especially as an artist. I have been creating in my bedroom without any sort of outside intervention or like anyone kind of looking in or looking at my art until my 20s. And that's why something like me is simply talking about my project is really insane. Like, and I really just wanted to push that kind of, oh, thank you for listening, not yet. And the main message I was trying to drive home is not every, like to be an artist, especially I'm a queer artist. It's just like, you don't always have to focus about the really intensive, overwhelming bigger picture of like capitalism destroying my life. That sometimes that to just take it and take the project to more make it about yourself, especially if you were a person who didn't really have any way to express yourself when you were growing up, having a project that is there purely just to fulfill that selfish need of needing to, wasn't selfish, but yeah, just to express yourself and to drive through your problems, pain, just any sort of, anything at all. Like, just, you're allowed to make art for yourself. It doesn't have to always be a product. It's art for me first. That's why I have so many projects, especially with my bands. I do it because I love it. It's not, these are like, all of my music on Bandcamp is always going to be free to download. It's like all of the hours of music I have, it's just free. It's just there because I have to make it. I have to make the art. And I'm also really thankful for this opportunity to speak about this because I've never done this before. And thank you for listening. Didn't have a panic attack. We won.
And thank you so much for sharing that. That's an incredible journey. I love how your journey as a musician and your journey as a person have intertwined and come together. That's amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Also, I'm still thinking about, you said something about the table with just stuff for making noise on it.
Yeah.
I can't tell about that.
I can show you a picture.
I want a noise-making table.
Yeah, I'll show you a picture later. If anyone wants to see it, I'll pull up the picture. I kind of realized it was a missed opportunity if I didn't pull it up. But...
I would love to see the noise-making table.
Yeah, I'll show you.
I'm so ready. Game Boys? Holy moly!
Yeah, I know. People just straight up just like grab old consoles. Anything that has a circuit, you can bend it to make sound.
Amazing.
Yeah, if it has a circuit, you can make it do hard.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Olga. That was awesome. So, our next speaker tonight is takatāpui Green MP and artist, Dr Elizabeth Kerekere. Elizabeth, or Dr Kerekere, okay, cool. I was like, I got to show my respect. So Elizabeth is founder of the takatāpui group, the Te Rarawana Trust, and funny the things you learn when you Google a person. I learned this new fact about you today, that you produced the first major research on the health and culture of the takatāpui whānau. I did not know that. That's really cool to have that groundbreaking research of our communities. Amazing. So, without further ado, Elizabeth, my best mate Elizabeth, please come forward and give us what you got. Yes, we can get onto the internet.
O me whine tuatahi, kanui te aroha kia koutou katoa, ai ngā hongo o te kahukura, me o tātou hoa, me o tātou whānau. So welcome to everybody who's come here today. I'm so inspired by the two speakers we've just had. Sam, I've known for a while, so familiar with your stunning work. I've been featured in your work, and I was one of the people that talked about my experience about accessing wins and how revolting that always is, despite my confidence and strengths, is go into that place and it's a mindful that they do. Olga, honestly, nearly every single thing you said, I've never heard before. But two things really stood out for me. Number one is can't do anything without my culture. It's just like that is what keeps me safe, and it keeps me grounded. You know, sometimes I get involved in lots of things, and I've been really privileged being placed that after a whole lot of work for no pay, that pieces of work and things have been produced, and it's gone out into the world. And so I'm really in it. And that's not always the creative things I would have liked to send out, but it's writing, it's research, and when, where am I going with this? I've got a point, I'm sure. But that drive that you have to produce, so I really, really resonated with that, so thank you so much for your presentation. It occurred to me that if we can access the internet, maybe we could Google me and there'll be some of my images of my artwork on there. And Google. So let's just, that is an experiment, which is going to be happening live behind me. But in the meantime, hello, I did your great idea to not press start. I'll get some time onto that. So I was brought up in Gisborne, where I was born, and when I was about 5, we moved to Dunedin, where my mother is from. So my father is Māori, and so we whakapapa to whānau ākai, ngā tiolioli, kia tanga maha ki rongo whakātini ngai tamanihiri from the Gisborne, and from my mother we whakapapa back to Ireland, and to County Clare and County Tipperary. And I've never in my whole life really had a sense of my Irish identity. But we went to Ireland 3 times over the course of 18 months, one of those trips with my mother, and that changed everything, because I was able to stand on the land of our ancestors. I was able to visit the house where our 700 years of whānau have lived on that side. So I'm just starting to embrace that part of myself. And okay, so this is not this is you. This is not it's on the little. But my father was an artist and a carver. So we grew up surrounded by art. We grew up knowing that we were artists. and that the best memories that I have of my father, and there are not many, but it's when we would sit together in silence and we'd do art together, or I would sit there for hours and hours and watch him carve. And it's those times, little precious memories, that whenever I'm doing work, and it would have been great to show you images of the artwork that I produced, but my father taught me that you always listen to your spirit, that it is automatically viewed into what your work is, and what you think about, what's going on in your life is carried into the artwork, at which point, when you finish it and let it go, it has a spirit of its own. And this is the only way I can rationalise that I still have Harry Potter books on my but it's that thing that it's a spiritual process. And he would always taught me that those gifts we have come from our ancestors, but then you put, because of our mauri and our own lifestyle and all the amazingness which is just ours at home, we put that into it, and that's part of the drive. That's where that drive comes from, that even when you can't. Okay, so this is a good one. So I'm going to work my way up to telling you the story about that. So we just did art all our lives. My father was one of those people that even if we didn't have money to pay the bills, he would never charge people for artwork. And so we all our lives never had Dad's work in our own house. We gave away every single thing we produced. And it's been really crazy because over the last few years, we've been contacted from people all over the country, and randomly people go, your father gave this to us 50 years ago. Your father gave this to us 40 years ago, and we're giving them back. So we're starting to get these things that Dad produced when he was some of them quite young. And he, it's just really lovely because we don't have much from him. Have the blood, have the attitude. They're going to lose that. When I moved home, we're in Dunedin, we lived in lots of places. We came here to work on Te Papa. So when I was in my 20s, I designed the Māori exhibition spaces of Te Papa and the marae spaces. And so I work with engineers, money people, all of the architects and that to create those spaces. And I designed the bicultural concept for the landscape. It's also, I've been an activist for my whole life as well, and it's part of those experiences. It's just, in my mind, it reminds me that our young people can do absolutely anything, that we just need, as for me now as a much older person, that we just need you to tell us what you need us to do, how we can support, and then we can step out of the way and get on with it. When I moved home, after 20 years in Wellington, I was so homesick. We moved back to Gisborne. And I was at that point a flash consultant. I was getting paid lots of money to do treaty relations and strategic planning, and that's kind of my passion. I love to organise things and I love to have a clear plan. I've fully taken all those plans straight into Parliament because we've got stuff to do in that place. But when it came to my art though, I felt like after 20 years in Wellington that I just was used up a little bit. And so I went to Toi Haukura. I stopped earning any money and became a full-time artist and did art school. We started every single day with karakia and mōtiatia. So we learned the old songs, the old chants from where I'm from. And it was an incredible way to start every single day, but it gave me 3 years to say, okay, Elizabeth, what's inside you? What are we going to get on with? And I have a great love of, this is one of the pieces I did in my last year of tukutuku. And this piece is called Mana Takatāpui. I did several of these. There's an accompanying one. This is in the Rainbow Room of Parliament, and that was bought by the Rainbow Network, the cross-party Rainbow Network in Parliament, to commemorate Pāsina marriage equality. So I want to be very clear that I did not make it for that purpose. they wanted to have something like this. I wanted it to hold space, and so it does. It has a companion piece, which is mana wahine, and that sits in my office now. Now my office is just actually above this room in Parliament House. Well, what I loved about takatāpui, all of my artworks, you can see the lashing, the 3 lines of lashing, if you can see that from where you are. Every time I used harakeke in my work, I went back to our marae. There's a stand there outside Poporawi, one of my big maraes in Gisborne, that those were planted by my great-grandmother and all of her cousins and her whānau. So I know when I go and I look at that I'm literally benefiting from my ancestors' work. And there was another stand where it's one of my other uncles, aunties' properties. You have to go down the hill and climb fences to get to it. This is massive stand, and my nannies used to go and camp there. And it was a real thing, I think, about women creating space and away from their partners, away from whatever, if they have children, and just being together and creating art. And so they would spend the whole time harvesting, and so that's the other place. So every single work that I produced always had a touch of home, so that wherever it went, always it's grounded in us. It's hard to tell from this, but I would always paint one design and then weave a separate design over it, because I wanted to reflect how there's all those intersections about what our life's about. It's never a single issue, it's never simple, our lives. And so it was a way for me then of showing how literally weaving together, but also acknowledging all of the nuance that comes. It's not the solid definitions of the colours of a flag. It's a woven thing that reflects all of the hues of the rainbow. And so, because I love takatāpui with a passion, and my favourite absolute design, which is from the tainata, which I'm so not surprised about this design here, is called the kaukau, and it's based on this here. So this is a warrior stance, and we use it to talk about leadership, about decision making. And then, you can't see it in here, but you'll be familiar with this potama design. You'll have seen this. Do not believe anyone that tells you that it's a stairway to heaven. Heaven was not a construct. A Christian heaven was not a construct pre-colonial society. So just hear that, accept it, dismiss it. And so for me, the potama represents whakapapa. It's about layers, because whakapapa is to make flat, and to layer things one upon another. And so whakapapa then it's generations. And so this piece then, it talked about honouring our takatāpui ancestors, everybody who's gone before us, whose names we may never know, who may never have had names for themselves, but knew who they were, knew who they loved. And then we have tied it together with power, with decision making, with leadership, to say today we will always honour them, and we will do every single thing we can to uphold the mana of all of our whānau in rainbow communities, and those who are not involved in it, but who are out there in the world, who may or may not need our support. And we will fight against homophobia, biphobia, interphobia, and transphobia at every place it occurs. And so when I created this work in 2012, in my last year at school, there was something in the back of my mind that said this should be in Parliament, because we are the power base of this country. I believe rests in our communities, in our whānau, in our hapu, our iwi, and all of our organisations of people who do real work on the ground. Because some things can only happen in Parliament. And so when it happened that I created this work, it got exhibited in some places, and then we brought it up to Wellington. Te Whanawhana we had an exhibition of some of us artists, and this was one of the pieces, and it was not long after all of that law had passed, and then some of the Rainbow MPs came and said, oh yes, we want to get this. And so for me, it was yes. It's like, I built a lot of things into that. And then when it gets there, then it'll start to spreading it out. And so I was really, really proud when that happened. And when I had my maiden speech a few weeks ago, I spoke about it, holding space. Holding space for takatāpui, holding space for what needs to be done in our communities. For someone like me, who identifies as takatāpui, but is also lesbian femme, I acknowledge that there's privileges that come along with that. That does not mean my life has been particularly easy. I never thought that I would grow old. But I have. And I'm thankful every day that I chose to live. And my art is one of the things that helped me live. Because if you have a drive to create, you have to stick around to do it. So this is kind of a statement about who I am in the world, what I want to create in the world, what I'm going to make happen, because I've already set bombs off in Parliament. I got told again just last night that people aren't happy with me about conversion therapy. It seemed like 160,000 voices was like just annoying to hear about. The other thing is when you produce something and you put it out to the world, you never know what's going to happen. And so my last story is I was doing some work in Ruatahuna for the Tuawhenua Trust. So it's in the middle of the Uruwera forest, incredibly remote, and primarily Māori speaking Tūhoi settlement. And I would wake every day and they had this mist, because they say they're descended from the mist maiden, and people who rangi. And so I wrote a poem. I wrote a series of poems when I was there, and I didn't think much about it. This is now 16 years ago I did that. And then a takatāpui book was being written. It was kind of a takatāpui book. And so they asked me for some work. And I said, and they remembered I'd said I'd done some poems, so they asked for those. And I was like, oh, I'm not really a poet. I just was inspired to produce them, but they put them in the book. And they got published in 2000, I think, 6 or 7. Was it last week, 2 weeks ago? We had the opening he tangata of the Wellington Pride Festival. We had incredible dancing, and it told the story of takatāpui from Papa and Rangi and just all the way through to Carmen and just real love and passion for our community. But he based the story around my poem. And yeah, they came to my office and asked permission to use it. I'm like, oh my God, yes. So you never ever know what you produce, how it's going to impact on someone. Always put your name on it. Send it out into the world. And even again, picking up on what you said, Olga, about when you can go back to something you've produced and you're in a different space and you can look at it differently and you can work with it. I was many years, I'm just debating whether I'm going to say this loud, but I'm going to. I was many years in counselling, many years. I grew up in a lot of abuse and ugly things happened to me as a young person. And it took me a long time to work through all that stuff. So I would be really strong in the activist stuff and the work stuff, but in the personal stuff, not so flash, not safe relationships, not happy. And it would come out in pain. I was in constant pain for years and years. and lots of people, not many people knew about it at the time. I would hide it. I used heaps and heaps of painkillers, and it got to a point where the pain was so bad that I was taking tramadol, then I was taking pure morphine tablets until they were actually injecting me with morphine at the hospital to cover the pain. And when I got to that point, I thought, this all has to stop, and that's when I started counselling. And it's like my body's just telling me, and I'm not listening at all, and that was because that whole disassociating that happens when you've had so much happen to yourself. And it was in those times that I'd forget that I'm an artist, and I couldn't always find my way out of it. So the final thing I want to say then is, let us use our creativity, whatever it is that's inside us and how it comes out, then to help us heal, to always be able to be ourselves, and to own what we produce, and the beauty and the strength and the joy that we can bring into the world. And so I'm so proud to stand amongst you, other artists and other people who I know do incredible things in this community. And thank you so much for having me. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa.
Goodness gracious, I'm a little bit starstruck, but also feeling just so empowered, and thank you so much for sharing your story and your mana with us when you were talking about the warrior pose and the strength of our community. Holy moly, I was getting chills. I was not prepared. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. My name is friend Elizabeth. So we do have a cheeky little bit of time for questions. If anyone would like to ask any questions of our speakers, no, we good? Oh,
I have one. Sam, where will we be able to find that the collage of those stories of beneficiaries?
Usually, if you just search hashtag We Are Beneficiaries, then there's we're on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and there's still stories coming through all the time because the welfare system still needs to be reformed.
Word.
I'll go give some of those a read.
I would also just like to take a hot minute to give Lavana some recognition. For those of you who don't know, Lavana Hoskins works here at the library, and she organised this whole event and also the one last week. So give it up for Lavana. Over the past few weeks and months, and we live together, so I'm probably going to get in trouble when we get home for embarrassing him. Was there another question?
Yeah, it's not a question to any of the speakers, but I long had the idea of why can't we in Pride Week organise an exhibition for queer artists? You know, that we can be more visible, that there's a gallery, sure there's a queer gallery owner somewhere that would like to do that.
Well, I 100% agree.
Yeah, so I don't have the means to organise it, but I'm just planting the seed that
if anyone out there has connections, let us know.
Outer Spaces, which is one of our youth organisations, are running a youth art exhibition next week.
I'm out of that.
Yeah, but you may want to appreciate how
I will appreciate
the 30th to the 4th of April
good.
at Ample House on level 3.
Amazing. Oh, that's good to know. I'll have to go check that out.
I have a cheeky question for Elizabeth. I'm wondering if you maybe identify a little bit from secrets or Norfolk, because I can't draw it from where you've been standing, and I really don't want to get it wrong. Like, just sort of squiggly.
Yeah, and thank you, Tara, our I want to say resident artist, and I guess you're a resident by virtue of sitting over there. So. Thank you, resident artist. Any other questions for our speakers or kōrero or? No, that's us. Okay, well, fantastic. I want to thank you guys all so much for coming. It's been amazing to have such a good turnout. To all three of the speakers, you all inspired and empowered us all so much, I think, through your words and your stories. So thank you so much, all of you, for sharing that. And thank you, everyone, for coming and taking part in some little oral history. And yeah, have a lovely rest of your night and a lovely rest of your Pride as well.